The fall of Babylon is not just a historical event, it is a powerful symbol of transformation and judgment. Imagine a colossal empire, filled with wealth and opulence, crumbling under the weight of its own decadence. What leads a city to become synonymous with corruption and destruction? This is the enigma that resonates through the centuries. Now, visualize the ruins of a civilization that once dominated the world. What do they still have to teach us? Throughout history, many have tried to decipher the mysteries of this fall. Some have seen signs of hope, while others have seen only absolute endings. How do these interpretations shape our view of the future? With every detail we explore, the narrative intertwines with our own reality. What is at stake when we talk about Babylon? What if the lessons from this forgotten colossus still echo in our time? Prepare for a journey that will challenge your beliefs and expand your understanding of ends and beginnings. How history repeats itself, and what can we learn from the shadows of the past? Let us delve into this labyrinth of meanings and implications. Babylon, this ancient city that rose along the banks of the Euphrates River, is almost like a character in an epic historical tale. I have always been fascinated by how it went from a center of power to a shadow of what it once was. At the height of its glory, Babylon was not just a city. It was a symbol of civilization, culture, and innovation. With its imposing ziggurats and bustling streets, it was the pulsating heart of Mesopotamia. The Babylonians, with their skills in astronomy and mathematics, left a legacy that still resonates in our modern society. However, what truly intrigues me is understanding how this splendor transformed into ruins. The historical context of Babylon is marked by a series of dynasties that rose and fell, reflecting a power play that involved alliances, betrayals, and of course, wars. The rivalries between city-states such as Assur and Ur were constant, and the ambitions of their leaders often resulted in bloody conflicts. The rise of Nebuchadnezzar II, for example, is a landmark that showcases Babylonian grandeur and determination, while also foreshadowing the fragility of that power. The Babylonian society was complex, with a social structure that included priests, nobles, merchants, and peasants. Each group had its defined role, and religion permeated all spheres of everyday life. This interconnectedness between the sacred and the secular was fundamental for the stability of the empire. Yet, I can't help but think that this very social structure contributed to the eventual fall of the city. As internal crises began to arise, social divisions became more evident, and the cohesion that once united Babylon began to crumble. In addition to political and social factors, the historical context of Babylon is also marked by natural disasters and climate changes. Mesopotamia, while rich in resources, was subject to floods and droughts that could devastate crops and lead to famine. These natural events, often seen as divine punishments, created an atmosphere of uncertainty that eroded the people's trust in their leaders. In reflecting on this, I realize that the history of Babylon serves as a reminder that even the grandest civilizations can be vulnerable to forces beyond their control. This multifaceted and turbulent environment surrounding Babylon made it a fascinating place, but also fertile ground for disillusionment and decline. From the 6th century BC, when external threats began to intensify, the city faced not only invasions, but also an internal crisis that tested its foundations. The story of Babylon is, in many ways, a reflection of human struggles in the pursuit of power, stability, and meaning in a world that can be unforgiving. The fall of Babylon is a theme that provokes deep reflection within me. Over the centuries, many intertwined factors led to this catastrophe. First, the invasions by neighboring powers, such as the Persians, played a crucial role. Babylon's capacity for resistance was severely tested, and in 539 BC, the city fell without a significant battle. It is almost as if the grandeur of Babylon had attracted the unwanted attention of its enemies. The cunning of Cyrus the Great in circumventing the city's defenses highlights how intelligent strategy can overcome an apparently unbeatable military force. Beyond invasions, internal crises were equally devastating. Corruption among leaders, social inequality, and popular dissatisfaction created a climate of discontent. I can't help but think how these internal issues are relevant even today. History tends to repeat itself. When citizens lose trust in their rulers, the stability of a nation becomes precarious. In the case of Babylon, this distrust was a factor that facilitated conquest by external forces. Natural disasters also played an alarming role in the history of Babylon. The city, although situated in a fertile region, was prone to floods and droughts that devastated crops. I wonder how the Babylonians felt seeing their once productive lands becoming barren. The resulting food insecurity from these climatic conditions undoubtedly contributed to social and political destabilization. It is a tragic irony that, in such an advanced place, nature could be one of its greatest enemies. The interplay between these factors, external invasions, internal crises, and natural disasters, forms a complex picture that explains the fall of Babylon. Each element did not act in isolation, but in a vicious cycle that eroded the city's strength over time. Reflecting on this, I realize that the history of Babylon is a powerful reminder that the resilience of a civilization depends not only on its greatness, but also on its ability to face adversities cohesively. I cannot ignore the role of a lack of innovation and adaptation either. Over time, Babylon, which was once a center of learning and innovation, began to stagnate. While other civilizations evolved, the city seemed to be stuck in its own traditions. The inability to adapt to a changing world and the resistance to new ideas may have contributed to its decline. It was as if the very essence of Babylon was in conflict with the need for evolution, and the city paid a high price for that. When it comes to the fall of Babylon, I cannot help but marvel at the various religious interpretations that have emerged throughout history. For many traditions, the fall was not just a historical event, but a symbol of divine judgment. The Bible, for example, mentions Babylon as an example of arrogance and idolatry, and many theologians interpret its fall as a moral lesson. It is fascinating to think that such a grand city became a symbol of what happens when one challenges divine order. In Christianity, Babylon is often associated with the apocalypse. The book of Revelation describes the fall of a great city that is interpreted as Babylon, representing corruption and sin. This interpretation not only shaped the understanding of the fall of the ancient city, but also influenced the worldview of generations. Reflecting on this, I see how the narrative of Babylon transcends time and serves as a warning for contemporary societies about the dangers of moral decay. Islamic traditions also have their interpretations regarding the fall of Babylon. For Muslims, the city is often seen as an example of disobedience to God and a cautionary tale about the consequences of straying from divine teachings. The interconnection between religion and politics in the history of Babylon is an aspect that makes me think about how beliefs shape historical narratives. This leads me to reflect on our own era and how the stories we tell about the past can influence the present. Additionally, religious interpretations highlight the importance of collective memory. The fall of Babylon is not just an isolated event, but part of a broader discourse on morality, justice, and redemption. Each religion brings its own lens to the story, and this makes me consider how the diversity of interpretations can enrich our understanding of the past. It is a reminder that history is not just about what happened, but also about how people chose to understand and narrate those events. Finally, reflecting on the religious interpretations of the fall of Babylon, I realize that these narratives continue to resonate in contemporary popular culture and politics. The city has become a symbol not only of decline, but also of renewal and hope. Even centuries after its destruction, the story of Babylon continues to teach us about the complexities of morality and the human condition. When I look at the archaeological discoveries related to Babylon, I feel a mix of fascination and admiration. Excavations in the region, which began in the 19th century, have revealed a wealth of information about the life, culture, and architecture of the ancient city. The ruins of the ziggurats, temples, and palaces are silent witnesses to a civilization that, although disappeared, left an indelible legacy. As I explore these ruins, I wonder what the ancient Babylonians would have thought about what remains of their grandeur. Archaeological discoveries not only help us understand the physical structure of Babylon, but also shed light on its daily life. Everyday objects, such as ceramics, tools, and even cuneiform inscriptions, provide a window into the mindset and practices of the Babylonian people. It is surprising how small artifacts can tell such rich stories. I feel connected to this distant past when imagining the hands that used these items. When we talk about the fall of Babylon, it's impossible not to think about the historical sources that attempt to tell this story. Believe me, the amount of documents and accounts that have reached us is, at the very least, impressive. But let's be honest, not all information is reliable. In many cases, the sources we have are biased, written by the victors, or those who had something to gain from the narrative they were creating. For a historian, this is a headache. But for those interested in the history of Babylon, it is an invitation to investigate more deeply. Ancient records, such as those found on clay tablets, often present a context that may not reflect the reality of the time. For example, Babylonian chronicles tend to glorify kings and their conquests, but fail to address the internal crises that were accumulating. Therefore, when we read about the fall of Babylon, we must question, to what extent are these accounts true? Often history is shaped by the intentions of those who write it. Moreover, the interpretation of these sources can vary widely. Archaeology, for instance, brings to light evidence that can contradict traditional historical narratives. What was seen by some as a great disaster may have been a relatively smooth transition for others. This clash of information leads us to reflect on the complexity of history and how much we still have to learn. It is also fascinating to note how historiography about Babylon has changed over the centuries. Ancient Greek historians, such as Herodotus, had their own interpretations that, while valuable, were not necessarily accurate. Modern historians attempt to apply rigorous and critical methods, but still face the challenge of gaps in the records. Therefore, historical criticism becomes an essential tool for demystifying the narrative of the fall of Babylon. Ultimately, it is this constant search for truths and interpretations that makes the study of history so passionate. Each new archaeological discovery or critical analysis can completely change our understanding of what really happened. For history lovers, this is an endless adventure. The fall of Babylon transcends historical events and transforms into a powerful symbol over the centuries. From antiquity to the present day, this narrative has been utilized in various forms in literature and art. What happens when such a grand empire falls? For many, this symbolizes the fragility of power and the inevitability of decay. This idea resonates across various cultures and periods, reflecting universal fears and hopes. In literature, the fall of Babylon is often associated with the idea of hubris, or the arrogance of the powerful, who, in their quest for more power, end up self-destructing. Authors from different eras have explored this theme, from poets to novelists, demonstrating that the story of Babylon still serves as a warning. It is a lesson that echoes through generations. What rises can easily crumble. Art has also not been left out of this symbolic representation. Paintings and sculptures have depicted the fall of Babylon as a moment of reflection, an invitation to contemplate the futility of human power. The tragic aesthetic present in various works often portrays the city in ruins, a clear symbol that even the greatest empires are subject to time and history. Furthermore, the fall of Babylon has found space in psychoanalytic analysis. Some theorists interpret the fall as a reflection of the collective unconscious, where the city becomes an archetype of all civilizations that have fallen in their pursuit of greatness. This reading offers an additional layer of meaning, suggesting that history is not just a sequence of events, but also an exploration of human fears and desires. Finally, the symbolism of the fall of Babylon is a testament to its ongoing relevance. In a world where new powers rise and fall all the time, the story of Babylon continues to inspire and warn, showing that the fragility of power is a constant in the human experience. When we begin to analyze the fall of Babylon, one of the questions that naturally arises is, how does this compare with the fall of other great civilizations? Looking at history, we can draw fascinating parallels, especially with civilizations like Rome and Carthage. History teaches us that the cycle of rise and fall is a recurring phenomenon, and each civilization has its peculiarities. For example, the fall of Rome is often seen as a more gradual process, while the fall of Babylon was relatively quick and violent, marked by invasions and internal crises. What can we learn from this? That each empire faces its own internal and external battles, and the reasons for its downfall can vary. However, one common aspect is the corruption and moral decay that precede collapse. Another interesting point of comparison is how neighboring powers react to these falls. In the case of Babylon, the rise of the Persians represents a shift in power that resembles the ascent of the Germans after the fall of Rome. In both cases, a power vacuum was created, allowing new groups to take control. This dynamic shows that history is not just about the fall, but also about what comes after it. Moreover, the way civilizations handle their declines can be revealing. While Babylon was marked by a rapid and devastating invasion, Rome disintegrated in part due to its own internal divisions. This leads us to reflect on the importance of social and political cohesion in the survival of a civilization. A divided society is often a doomed one. Finally, the comparison between these civilizations helps us understand that despite differences in context and time, the lessons are universal. History is a grand laboratory where we can observe the consequences of human actions over time. Thus, the fall of Babylon is not just an isolated story, but part of a larger pattern that continues to repeat throughout human history. The legacy of Babylon is a fascinating and multifaceted aspect of history. After its fall, the influence of Babylonian civilization endured in various ways, shaping the culture and administration of the civilizations that followed. When we think of legacy, we often refer to innovations, traditions, and even cultural emblems that transcend time. One of the most notable legacies of Babylon is the legal system it developed. The Code of Hammurabi, for example, is one of the earliest written sets of laws in history. Its influence extended far beyond Babylon's borders, serving as a model for legal systems in various cultures. In many ways, the fall of Babylon did not erase its contributions. On the contrary, these ideas about justice and administration were assimilated by later civilizations. Additionally, Babylonian architecture left a lasting impact. Design and construction elements, such as the use of clay bricks and monumental structures, were adopted by neighboring cultures. The ruins of Babylon, even after its fall, became a symbol of ambition and greatness, inspiring architects and artists worldwide. This influence can be seen in various works of art and constructions throughout history. We must also remember Babylon's contribution to astronomy and mathematics. The Babylonians developed an advanced numerical system and were pioneers in astronomical observations. This knowledge was transmitted to civilizations such as the Greeks and Romans, who continued to expand upon these ideas. Thus, even after its fall, Babylon remained a source of knowledge and inspiration for scholars in the sciences. Finally, the cultural legacy of Babylon is a testament to its resilience. Although its fall was a tragic milestone, the ideas, innovations, and traditions that emerged from its civilization continue to resonate in modern society. The history of Babylon teaches us that even in the face of adversity, culture and knowledge can endure, shaping future generations. The fall of Babylon also had profound repercussions on the power dynamics in Mesopotamia and neighboring regions. When such an influential empire collapses, what happens to its neighbors? To understand this, we need to explore how politics and power were exercised in Babylon, and how these elements changed after its fall. After the fall of Babylon, we witnessed a reconfiguration of power in the region. The Persians, who were previously a relatively smaller group, seized the opportunity to expand their domains. The fragility of Babylon left a vacuum that allowed new powers to rise. This change was not just a matter of military conquest, it was a complete restructuring of the alliances and rivalries that defined the politics of the time. Another important aspect to consider is how the fall of Babylon influenced other powers' perceptions of what could happen to them. History spreads, and the fall of an empire is often seen as a cautionary tale. When Babylon fell, the economic impact was felt throughout the region, like a domino effect. The trade routes, which had once thrived with life and prosperity, became dark and uncertain. The city, which was a vital center of commerce, saw its markets emptied and its economic influence rapidly diminish. Merchants, who once traveled from afar to trade goods such as silk, spices, and precious metals, began to avoid the area, fearing the instability that the fall had generated. Additionally, the Babylonian economy was intrinsically linked to agriculture, and the disorder that followed the fall directly affected agricultural production. The lands that were once fertile and well-maintained were now abandoned, and food scarcity became a serious problem. This scarcity not only impacted the local population, but also the neighboring regions that depended on Babylonian agricultural supplies. Communities that once thrived now struggled to sustain themselves, creating a cycle of poverty that persisted for generations. Another important aspect was the shift in economic power dynamics. With the fall of Babylon, other city-states and empires began to expand their influences. Cities like Assur and Nineveh, for example, started to gain prominence, seizing the opportunity to become new commercial centers. This not only diversified trade routes, but also redistributed wealth in the region. The trade that once flowed through Babylon was diverted, and new centers began to emerge, altering the economic landscape of Mesopotamia. The economic impact of Babylon's fall was also reflected in the currencies and financial systems of the time. The lack of a unified monetary standard, which had been a strong point during the Babylonian era, led to fragmentation in commercial transactions. Each city-state began to issue its own coins independently, complicating trade further between different regions. What was once an interconnected economy was now becoming a maze of coins and financial systems, hindering trade and cooperation. In summary, the economic consequences of Babylon's fall were profound and far-reaching. The collapse of such an influential commercial center not only affected the city itself, but also reverberated throughout Mesopotamia and beyond, forever changing the economic landscape of the region and ushering in a new era of uncertainty and adaptation. The way the fall of Babylon has been narrated throughout history is fascinating, as it blends real and mythological elements. Mythological narratives in particular shaped the perception of the fall and served as a means to understand complex events. Stories of gods and heroes were often used to explain disasters and social changes, and Babylon was no exception. In many ways, the fall of the city was interpreted as divine punishment, a reflection of its moral and spiritual decline. In ancient literature, Babylon frequently appears as a symbol of greatness and power, but also of hubris. This duality is explored in various narratives, where the city is seen as a place of wealth and prosperity, but also as a location that defied the gods. The stories surrounding the fall often emphasize the fragility of human power in the face of divine will, suggesting that the destruction of Babylon was inevitable due to its transgressions. This type of narrative not only served to explain the fall, but also to educate future generations about the consequences of arrogance. In addition to mythological narratives, historical chronicles also play a crucial role in shaping the perception of Babylon's fall. Records from scribes and historians contemporary to the fall provide valuable details about the events that led to the city's disintegration. However, it is interesting to note that these accounts were often influenced by their own political and social agendas, which means that objectivity is a debated issue. The narratives tend to glorify certain aspects while downplaying others, creating a version of history that may not fully reflect reality. Over time, the fall of Babylon became a recurring theme in various cultures. Narratives about the city and its fall were reinterpreted and adapted, gaining new meanings in different contexts. In the Middle Ages, for example, Babylon began to be seen as a symbol of sin and corruption, especially in theological works that sought to warn about the dangers of moral decay. This new interpretation helped solidify Babylon's image as a cautionary tale for future civilizations. These narratives, both mythological and historical, continue to resonate in contemporary culture. They influence not only how we understand the fall of Babylon, but also how we approach issues of power, morality, and consequence in our own lives. The story of Babylon, therefore, transcends time, serving as a powerful reminder that the lessons of the past still have much to teach us. In today's world, the fall of Babylon is a topic that sparks great interest in both academic and popular circles. The way modern scholars re-evaluate the events that led to its downfall reflects changes in research methodologies and cultural perspectives. New approaches, such as collaborative archaeology and the analysis of ancient sources, have provided a richer and more multifaceted view of Babylonian history. This allows us to understand not only the events themselves, but also the social and cultural context surrounding them. One of the most notable reinterpretations concerns Babylon's role as a cultural and intellectual center. Once seen merely as a symbol of decay, the city is now recognized for its significant contributions in areas such as mathematics, astronomy, and law. Modern scholars have explored how these advancements were important not only for Babylon, but also for the civilizations that followed. This shift in focus helps to balance the narrative, showing that the fall was not just an end, but also a chapter in a broader history of human development. Furthermore, contemporary reinterpretations have also addressed the fall of Babylon from a gender perspective. There is a growing interest in understanding how women and other marginalized groups experienced the fall and its consequences. Traditional narratives, often dominated by male and military figures, are being challenged and enriched by research that seeks to include the voices and experiences of all Babylonian citizens. This not only broadens our understanding of the event, but also reminds us of the complexity of ancient societies. Modern reinterpretations are not limited to the academic field. Popular culture has also appropriated the history of Babylon, bringing new narratives to the general public. Movies, series, and books frequently reference the fall of the city, using it as a symbol of ruin and transformation. These representations, although not always accurate, help keep the history of Babylon alive and question what it represents in our contemporary society. Babylon has become a cultural icon that transcends its own history. Thus, the fall of Babylon continues to be a fertile ground for research and reflection. Modern reinterpretations challenge established narratives, offering new perspectives that help us better understand not only the history of Babylon, but also the lessons we can draw from it in our own times. This ongoing evolution of understanding is a testament to the enduring relevance of history. The fall of Babylon carries significant theological weight, especially in Christian traditions. In the Bible, Babylon is often mentioned as a symbol of sin and apostasy. The book of Revelation, for example, references the fall of Great Babylon as an event representing the condemnation of evil and the victory of good. This eschatological interpretation has influenced the Christian view of what happens to civilizations that stray from divine principles. The fall of Babylon, therefore, is seen not only as a historical event, but also as a moral warning. Christian theology also uses the fall of Babylon to discuss themes of judgment and redemption. The narrative of its destruction is frequently used as a metaphor for the final judgment, where the forces of evil will be defeated. The idea that Babylon, with all its glory and wealth, could fall into disgrace serves to reinforce the doctrine that nothing is permanent and that divine justice will ultimately prevail. This message has resonated deeply within Christian communities over the centuries, offering hope in times of crisis. Moreover, Babylon is often associated with concepts of idolatry and materialism in Christian theology. The city is viewed as a symbol of worldly temptations, and its fall is interpreted as a call to repentance and the pursuit of spiritual values. This connection between Babylon and moral corruption has influenced not only theology but also Christian practice, prompting many to reflect on their own lives and the influences of the world around them. And now, my friends, we arrive at the climax of this incredible journey through the fall of Babylon. Have you ever stopped to think about what this story represents not only for the past, but for our present and future? Babylon, with its opulence and decadence, is a powerful symbol of the struggle between good and evil, inviting us to reflect on our choices. Imagine for a moment, what are the Babylons that surround your life today? What are you willing to leave behind to avoid being consumed by these temptations? The message that everything that rises in pride may one day fall is more relevant than ever, isn't it? What if I told you that the events we are experiencing now might be echoes of ancient prophecies? How do you prepare for the challenges that lie ahead? The fall of Babylon is not just a story of destruction, but a call to vigilance and reflection. So, before we wrap up, think about this. What is your role in this eternal narrative? What will you do with this wisdom?